The first industrial revolution was the first time we had a surplus physical power in the world beyond just muscle and a little bit of wind and water, right? We figured out how to kind of capture physical energy and industrialize it. And this is essentially the first time we're doing the same thing with cognitive energy. We have an excess of real cognitive energy. And we've been trying to do that with computers for the last 30, 40, 50 years.
Welcome to UnNatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nic Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
Artificial intelligence may be the defining technological shift of our generation, but history shows that breakthrough technologies rarely transform industries on their own. The companies and individuals that survive are the ones willing to continuously reinvent themselves before the market forces them to. Tonight's episode explores the collision between entrepreneurship, platform shifts, AI, and organizational evolution through the eyes of someone who has lived through multiple technological revolutions, from the birth of collaborative cloud software to the rise of modern AI systems. This conversation is about what separates companies that adapt from those that disappear. Sam Schillace is the CVP and Deputy CTO at Microsoft. Before Microsoft, Sam held prominent engineering roles at Google and Box. He has also founded 6 startups, including Rightly, which was acquired by Google and became Google Docs. Let's go.
Sam, welcome to UnNatural Selection. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
And it's great to reconnect. You and I met for the first time, I think like 14 years ago or so, back in 2010, 2011. It was post the Rightly acquisition, and we were talking about online documentation and collaboration online and so on. And your career has definitely gone through many different revolutions ever since then, right? You went to Box, and now you're at Microsoft.
Then, yeah, that's right. I mean, I think I even was a venture capitalist for Google Ventures for a year.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know if that was before or after, but yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's great to connect with you because I think you bring so much different perspectives to this conversation, right? Because right now you have this deputy CTO role at Microsoft where you're working on AI, agentic AI, you're working on some tools around productivity. But you started obviously in Rightly with kind of creating this online collaboration experience that we've all grown to just use on a daily, I would say hourly basis. And so like you've lived and you've pioneered this transition from standalone documents that live in your desktop, and now we mail back and forth and we have these like version control issues, to collaboration online, and zoom forward now to agentic AI, which is now starting to kind of transfer some of that authorship from humanity into bytes and software. So I think this conversation is going to be super interesting. But before we get going, just to give us in your own words, what drives the work that you do, can you please let us know what need or impact drives your work?
That's an interesting question. By the way, like I still have the very first Google Doc in my personal account. And it's fun. It's a really funny little thing too. Like both of the back end and the front end have been rewritten at least twice that I know of, probably more. So like it's this sort of document of Theseus. Like I think an NFT would be a more authentic actual first Google Doc than the actual first Google Doc. So like the Computer History Museum wanted to like curate it, and I'm like, I don't know how you're gonna. I can print it for you, but what does that do?
Screenshot.
Thing. So like what motivates me? I mean, I don't know, like I've always been a maker. I think that's probably the most core part of my personality is I just like to make stuff. And I think, I hang out with some other folks that are makers, and there's sort of like the pioneers, the town planners, and the settlers. I think it's pioneers, settlers, and town planners, right? Or there's like these personalities that are like really out there and really exploring. Then there's people who are like kind of settling once a place is found, and then there's people who like plan the town and scale it out. And I'm very much the first kind of that maker, where I just like to explore stuff. And so a lot of what I do, I just kind of do it because it's fun to do more than anything else. And it's puzzles, it's interesting. It's, I'm curious about stuff. I like to build things. It's obviously really gratifying to have built something like Google Docs, like Rightly. I don't know the last count. I think it's part of G Suite, which I think is a 2 billion user product, so it's, you know, way up there, and people talk to me about it all the time. So it's like really neat to have done that. Like that's super gratifying that you like have built something that lots of people have used. So that's really fun. It's kind of hilarious. I go give talks at like universities, and you know, go back to the University of Michigan, and I'll tell them like I'm a GDocs inventor, and they'll be like, it's like telling them that, like I invented water. They're like, "Wait, you didn't invent what? No, it's always been." I'm like, "No, I invented water. It's like everyone was thirsty before me, and then I invented water, and like then there was." And they're like, "You're lying." You know, it's like they just don't believe that I invented like that. Like I did Google Doc and have the first one and everything.
It's so transformational. I can totally see that, you know, especially kids in college, you know, somebody like 19 years old or so, they don't
Yeah.
know a world of not using, so especially in academia, right? I mean, a lot of academics are
Yeah.
using it. I can definitely see something like that, which is like, how'd you invent something that I use every single day? I don't know a world without it. And I don't know, what is it? 1/4 of the human population uses it.
Right. And it's something like that. I mean, you know, like there are a few, like I used to give a talk on like how to invent Google Docs. And like, I don't think it's both really easy and really hard is kind of the answer, right? Like the patterns are pretty straightforward if you can get your head there. And then the hard part is like luck and persistence. Like, you know, the real thing is like, first of all, you have to care. Like you have to care about building interesting things. But you kind of get, you know, you get yourself into this disruptive mindset that you're open-minded to things. This is kind of the most important thing, I think, which is, you know, we have this natural reaction to things that challenge our worldview. If you're wrong about your worldview, you know, if something challenges it, like there's this very stark choice of like either you're wrong or it's wrong. And it's really hard to be like, oh, I was wrong. I'm dumb. The world's actually this different way. That's a hard transformation to make. And so like people kind of wind up telling what I call why not stories. Where they like they'll have the emotion first and then they'll come up with a story for why that's not actually challenging. And so like that's a really easy trap for anyone to fall into. I still fall into it. So like that's like the very first thing when you're going to go try to do something like this. And then the rest of it is basically just like lots of shots on goal. Get interested in something, get your tools to be sharp, make it very easy to do interesting stuff at the edge of what's possible, and make it really easy to do experiments and like and iterate. And that's really the formula. You know, like because that first piece, the why not versus what if, even for my two co-founders of Rightly, when I started having this idea and I wanted to go play with JavaScript in the browser and start building this thing, they were skeptical, like because they were deep experts in desktop applications and word processing. And so like they did exactly what I just described. They had the why not reaction of like, that's not going to work. Like the browser isn't good enough. The, you know, JavaScript isn't good enough. Like, you know, people aren't going to trust it. Like there are all these stories that people would make up and you can't really argue with an emotion is the thing. Like, you know, if people have this negative emotion, it's very difficult to argue past it. So what you wind up doing is like make your experiments cheap. And in that moment, like what I did with them was say like, well, let's just try it for a week. Let's just build it, see how far we get. And, you know, since it was cheap and had some tools that we could build it out of really easily, we did. And that like instantly both convinced us that it was really compelling and also broken. And so we had to go spend a bunch of time like making it not be broken. But like that, you know, cheap experiment was the thing that let us get there. People always look back at something like Rightly and Google Docs and think of it as like the straight path because you can just see the path through the brambles from afar. But like, you know, I had to go through brambles to get here. Like it's not obvious at the time. And that's always like I always try to tell people that it's like, look, you can be an innovator too. Don't sit around waiting for some idea where somebody's like, oh, I have this idea. It'll be a billion user idea. Let me just go do it. Like, that's never what it's like. It's always messy. It's always uncomfortable. It always feels too early. It's always got hair all over it and problems that you don't know how to solve. There's always skeptics. You know, people think you're nuts. People think it's stupid. People think it's a toy. Like, that's always, I'm not the first person to say this stuff, but it's like really, really true that like, that's just like how it is. It's a little bit later in here. Sorry, I'm in the cave. It like got dark. It like gonna rain out.
What you're saying definitely resonates.
It's always like that. Always.
Oh yeah,
That's
no,
like the one lesson.
yeah, it's what you're saying definitely resonates because I've started like innovation labs at Fortune 500 companies. And when you do something like that or at Harvard, it's not just coming up with the ideas. You have to create an environment and a culture that fosters innovation. And part of that is creating a space of like intellectual safety, so psychological safety. But then also creating mechanisms. One of the things that I really like to do, and this goes back to your why, what is it? You said why not versus what if.
Yeah.
And the thinking there is it draws from a book, Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono, which talks about how when you get a group of more than like two people trying to work on something, especially ideation, where things clash is where people are wearing different hats. So if I'm wearing a white hat where I'm saying coming up with new ideas are really hard and they're almost always imperfect. And at the other extreme are black hats, which basically are just saying like no's and buts. It won't work because of this.
Yeah.
It won't work because of this. And in between, there are stages like green is really looking at financial, like is this financially feasible, all the way to like
Sure.
yellow, red, and all different colors. So it's 6 hats overall. And if you have a group of people and if you have white hats, all it takes is one person with a black hat that's going to kill the energy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm super sensitive to this. And like, fortunately, one of the real gifts of Rightly in my life is that, that one I feel really lucky about, but I take advantage of it now because I'm just like, I don't know, man, like I created a billion user thing. Like I'm gonna go do this fun thing over here.
Yeah.
You don't think it makes sense. That's fine, but you don't get to come, like I'm gonna go do my thing. Like, and so I get to, just go build stuff. And I've just learned to be confident about that. Right. Like I've been right enough about crazy stuff, crazy sounding stuff after Rightly, like that I just, like I don't list the black hats, I just kind of put them out,
Yeah.
like you just,
Well,
you can be part of the brainstorm. It's yes and right. It's improv. If you can't do the improv, you have to go somewhere else.
exactly. Because, like you said, the innovation process is inherently messy and it starts really precarious. And so you can snuff that out very quickly. But if you give it a chance and you're working collaboratively, you can build it into something. But before we get past the Ripley stage, what problem were you trying to solve with it? Because we can always look back, like you said, when we look back in history, it's very linear. But I could say collaboration online. I could say like get rid of like the versioning problem.
No, it's more accidental than that. Like again, and by the way, like I'll answer this question, but I want to say like one of the things that I embrace a lot in my life is mess, and you can kind of tell it's kind of messy here. And like, and I have this saying where that is kind of my personal model is like from error comes virtue, which means like, when mistakes are often where innovation comes from. It's like embracing that mess and like letting a mistake happen and then seeing it and seeing the value in it. One of my favorite stories is how stainless steel was invented, which is that like somebody was working with his intern on early metallurgy research and the intern screwed up and put like literally 3,000 times as much chromium in one of their samples as they were supposed to. And they just threw it away, like, oh, that one's bad, like threw it away. And like 2 weeks later, they're like, why is that one shiny? Like in the pile of old ingots, and like, figured out what had happened. So like, from error comes virtue, like, mistakes are often like where this stuff comes from. But to answer your question, like, and like, it's a little bit related, like I was in that experimental mode. I did not have, this is again, like exactly what I just said. Like, it is not the case that I sat down in 2005 and was like, I shall invent Web 2.0 in cloud computing and I will like bring, I'm like, no, like that's not what happened. Like what happened was I read about JavaScript, which was like called Ajax at the time, right? And I was like, oh, that's like, as a nerdy programmer who's familiar with the tech and who likes to play with stuff, I'm like, like an interpreted language in a browser. That sounds like fun. Like, I don't have to deal with a compiler or an environment. Let me like mess with that. And kind of concurrently, I found out about like this feature of the browser is called content editable, where you could just like tell the browser to go into edit mode for the document. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. Like you could kind of put those together and like you could run some JavaScript and like do stuff to that browser and like blah, blah, blah. And we had a server. And so we like wired it in. And I was just like, let's just see what happens kind of thing. Like it seems like fun. Let's go build this. Like literally. And like, like I said, my teammates were like, this is a bad idea, dude. Like, what are you doing? And you mentioned it before, like at the time, there was a pain point. It's always good to have a pain point. It was a broad pain point. Which was like, if you wanted to share stuff, you were either in the misery of sending emails around with documents attached when you had version trouble and people could never find stuff, or you were in the misery of a shared file server, which most of your listeners probably don't know what it is really, but like, people would like
Log it.
check the document out, lock it, and go home, and then nobody could do anything with it. And I was like, this is really broken. Both of these were like miserable, broken solutions for working together. And for like, we instantly, we were working out of our garages. We set it up, we were at separate places. We were like, this is amazing. We're working together. Cool. Naive implementation, like lasting wins. We're just like, oh crap, that doesn't work. Like, stepping on each other. So I guess we have to go figure out how to do concurrency, like concurrent editing. That turns out to be a really hard problem. Like that took us like 6 months to get right. It was, especially at the time when like JavaScript wasn't standard and the browsers are weird. Browsers will render the same document with a different underlying text structure. Like you can say the same document different ways. So syncing across different browsers, like kind of going back and forth between that like logical and semantic mode is like really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And all this pre-operation transform, like really hard to do. So like, it's another good illustration of like, if we really fully confronted the idea at the beginning, we might not have done it. We might have been like, oh, it's going to be way too hard to do it. But it was more just like, well, this is an interesting experiment. And then we had this visceral feel for how good it was. And then a lot of the skepticism was like, well, I don't know if the browser can really handle it, but the value that it brought into the world, like that kind of rang that bell of like cloud apps, the whole ecosystem pulled browser performance and cloud performance forward. And we just got to ride that wave, right? Like, so at the time, some of those, that's kind of another, I really think this is another thing that people don't get right a lot is they see the point, not the line, right? Like, so, if you, in the point in time in late 2005, if you were like, can I build Google Docs G Suite of today in those browsers? I think it's like IE4. Like, no, you can't. They won't really work. But the world changes, and like, if you can see the trend, and you're adding value, and the world's motivated to add value, like you can anticipate this stuff. Like this is another that lesson emerged really strongly in the early AI days for me, where I could just see like this is amazing. Like these early models are incredible. Yeah, they're broken. Like they hallucinate. They're weak. They have small context windows. They're not that smart, et cetera, et cetera. But like you can see the outline of what's coming, and you can see the trend, and like it's like a lot of the commentary around AI just seems really laughable to me because I've
Oh,
lived
yeah.
through this kind of thing.
No, I
Just like, no,
totally agree. Yeah, I see same thing happens in science. When people talk about like we can't treat this or we can't cure this and whatever, it's like, yeah, today. But think about how far we've come in
right,
100 years. Give us another 50. And I'm sure a lot of these things will
right,
be solved.
right.
And there's going to be new problems, but I totally agree. It's like that point in time. And, to that point, when you talk about the skeptics, whether it be with rightly, but if we project all the way forward now, you've written things like no prize for pessimism. And we talked a little bit earlier before we started recording on, why not versus what if. What do pessimists consistently get wrong today about AI in the future of work? Basically, the things that you're working on today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, like all this stuff is a great illustration of like all the same patterns kind of over and over and over again. Right. Yeah, I think well, first of all, like that sort of point versus line is a really good opportunity to ask yourself a why not story, tell yourself a why not story. I mean, right. So like, it's just a good way to be pessimistic if you want to be pessimistic. This is why, by the way, like the title of that book, No Prize for Pessimism, is basically I had this realization at one point. I'm an engineer. Engineers are naturally kind of pessimistic. It's like I was just like trying to break myself of that habit. And I had this like realization at one point that like there's no prize for being pessimistic and right. If some new technology emerges and it doesn't really work, like and you were an early critic and you were right about it, okay, we'll give you a blue ribbon. Who cares? Like
Mhm.
prizes for being optimistic and right. Like it's not that interesting to like be the naysayer. And so there's definitely a lot of that going on in AI. I think like, there's definitely a lot of concern and worry about stuff because it is a very disrupted thing, right? Like a lot of stuff is changing. It is kind of a category shift. We are really industrializing thinking, which is a very new thing. These tools are incredibly capable and they're moving really fast, which is also really disorienting. What I've been finding, I've been spending a lot of time doing agentic coding. We built this thing at Microsoft. It's an open source project called Amplifier, which you can find on GitHub. It's very open, very modular agentic coding harness. And so we've been using it on these frontier models to build stuff. And it's just really kind of incredible how fast you can build things. Like I had an Amplifier session run for 62 hours over the weekend and it built this terminal UI for the thing. It's actually up in my personal repo right now. Built this just giant app, like hundreds of features, literally like 25 feature epochs, 90 total feature groups,
Wow.
all of it tested, all of it working, super customized, really fun. It wrote its, I have this other tool I built that's like builds presentations. We call them amplifier stories. That's up on GitHub. So I wrote a story that documented all that. And then it wrote another story to show off the app itself. And like, so it's really fun. But like what, for me, what I see is, AI is letting you get past a lot of toil, which is really what innovations and inventions are typically about, is removing human toil. So a lot of the work, that I have done for most of my career programming is toil. It's, figuring out what's the syntax of this program, figuring out why this piece of code doesn't compile. Why is this package not installed in my environment? Why is this bug working?
I
This code
mean,
not working the way I thought. All that stuff.
I remember early days for me coding, the toil that I was dealing with is why does this modem, this 56K modem,
Yeah,
not connect to my
all of
Linux
it.
box?
Right. All of it. And like, it's not like there isn't toil. Like, there's still toil in the
Uh,
AI world, but it will do a lot of it for you. And so what that means to me is that, now if you have ideas and you're creative, you're actually more busy rather than less busy. I spend a lot of time on like, a lot of the Valley spends time on like private WhatsApp groups and stuff. So I'm on WhatsApp group with a whole bunch of very senior people, very elite coders. And to a person, we are all super busy
yeah.
now. It's not like, oh, cool. I wasn't writing that much code before this started to happen. It's not like, oh, cool, I was writing 100 lines a week. Now I'm writing 0. Yay. Well, I'm still writing 0. I wasn't really writing that much, but like now I'm building like massive things. I will easily build in a week what would have taken me at least a year in my prime as a coder to
Mhm.
build like routinely. And so like you're kind of only limited by your imagination. What you start to find is that the real bottleneck is human attention. The only thing that's really constant now in your cognitive environment is your ability to pay attention to stuff because you're only awake and have energy for so many hours of a day. Like that's that's the fixed resource. It's not, you can't change it. And so you got to be really careful that you've got this thing, this agentic thing that does stuff for you. It'll do whatever you ask it to do. You got to make sure you're not asking it to make more work for yourself.
Mm.
It's easy to do. It's easy to ask it to make work for yourself. And so like there's some thoughtfulness and some strategy to it. But when you're careful about it and you understand it, like it's just incredibly enabling. And so like you know, personally, I think I'm just predisposed to like be a what if kind of person in general. Like I just like to play with new toys. But that's I think that's kind of where you have to be right now of just like, well, let's just say what if? Like what if these things are really that valuable? What if they can do all this stuff? What if I learn them? What if I can build stuff?
Well, I
I
think
think really
and if you're an executive, I think you actually it's dangerous to think why not? Because the field
yeah,
is moving
really is.
so quickly that you could
It really
spend
is.
6
Yeah.
months saying why not and you're already outside the game.
Yeah. It's very true. And we've gone, something has happened in like the last 6 to 8 weeks. Like we've tipped over. So I've been doing AI coding for about 3 years at Microsoft. We're starting before even ChatGPT with like GPT-4 a couple months earlier. Built this thing called the semantic kernel, which is an early orchestrator to orchestrate models. And a whole bunch of like early RAG stuff and early multi-agent stuff. Like we've been really like playing with this a lot and trying. And from the beginning, the thought was always like, oh, this thing is smart. It's like the self-referential, like first class programming object. Like I'm going to put it in my code and it'll do stuff for me. And that'll be like a totally different kind of coding. And it hasn't really worked until now.
Huh.
And in like the last couple of months, a mixture of like people like us getting better at the agentic harnesses and the models themselves getting better. So code emerging, Codex got really good, GitHub Copilot got really good. The underlying models, a couple of them are very, very good now. All of that has like come together, and now the systems are good enough that they understand themselves, and you can build tooling. We have like Amplifier is its own foundation expert that understands how it's built. And so you can ask it like, oh, I need to do this, like figure out how to add it to yourself. Here's a cool paper that has some interesting techniques. Go read that paper and tell me what you might build that would be useful that we're missing from the system. We do that all the time. That's really
Wow.
fun. Stuff like that. So like really, really, yeah, really cool kind of climb the stack, stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
And that's just like, it's been really merging.
yeah, it's when we talked about how there have been these
I'm
waves of
sorry. Sorry. I was going to say, I was going to react to. Sorry to interrupt, but I was going to I was trying to react to your thing about being out of touch for if you say no for 6 months, you're kind of out of the game.
Mhm.
It's like weeks now.
Yeah.
It's like it's if you're really like it's so fast now. Like I was just going to say, it's 6 months, 1 month. Like you really have to stay on top of this now if you're an executive. Like really,
Yeah.
really. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, not at all. I was just going to say that you and I have been around in this industry long enough that we've seen all these waves of innovation that have disrupted the field, from personal computers to the internet to the browser to mobile, IoT, we've seen these waves, and it's like everybody needs a browser strategy, everybody needs a mobile strategy. What I think
Right.
really makes this different is that, and the idea came to me from reading one of your papers around like what documents really mean and how they're morphing the way that we work. The idea that for the first time, we've created a tool that is transferring some of the authorship away from humanity. And if you think about every other creation, every other innovation that we've created has freed us from doing some of that mundane work, all the way back
Mhm.
where we're talking about just hand axes, all the way through everything that we've talked about since. But at the core of the creativity has always been humanity. Humanity has been using these
Mhm.
tools to create something bigger than itself. Now, for the first time, we've created this tool, and you're talking about it from the perspective of agentic writing its own code and self-referencing and all that kind of stuff. But in a way, it's its own author too. It's the first transference of that authorship to a non-human entity. And I think that's what makes this both potentially scary, but also something that I could see scaling at extraordinary
Yeah.
speeds once we get it
Yeah.
fully at scale.
It is. I mean, there's lots of different ways to think about kind of what's going on. There's a couple different ways that I like. One interesting thing. This is really out there. By the way, like you keep mentioning my letters, I should just say to people like I have a Substack. It's Sunday Letters from Sam. So if people want to read my stuff, I read every Sunday. But like, so there's one kind of this will be really weird, and then I'll give you a less weird one. But like, why are we humans? Well, we're humans because we have big brains. We have big brains because we basically got comfortable with fire, and fire let us move some of our digestion out of our bodies. Like fire basically pre-digests, the first technology we ever used as humans. And that, you know, the animals have a fixed tissue budget. You can't just decide your brain is bigger. It has to make something else be smaller. And so we have a very small gut relative to our brain because fire let us do that. We externalize our digestion and we got this cognition in exchange. And I kind of feel like AI is starting to let us externalize some of our cognition as well in this interesting way. And so like I almost feel like it's this huge category shift where it's like it's going to make us into something different in some way. So that's kind of interesting. The other really big thought that others have said, it's not unique to me, is, the first industrial revolution was the, first time we had a surplus physical power in the world beyond just muscle and a little bit of wind and water, right? We figured out how to kind of capture physical energy and industrialize it. And this is essentially the first time we're doing the same thing for cognitive energy, where we have an excess of real cognitive energy. And we've been trying to do that with computers for the last 30 or 40, 50 years, where we've been sort of climbing this stack where it's very syntactic and mechanical. And what's really different now is that it's broken through into the layer of semantics and meaning, and intention, right? And so now we really have this industrialization of like complex semantic thought that's actually really, really powerful. And all of everything that is on the screen here is the result of the first revolution where like, we can have these comfortable lives because we have physical access. 200 years ago, by far the odds were that you were a farmer basically barely surviving. Like that's
Yeah.
what 98% of the world was 250 years ago. Now, we all live like, medieval royalty plus plus, like,
Mhm.
and that's the industrial revolution. So like, I very much think that's in the cards, if we grow up and live up to it with the cognitive revolution.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
we'll
you
see.
mentioned also that this technology allows us to shift past some of the mundane work. A lot of
Mhm.
people are worried, maybe a lot of the, why nots are worried about displacing mass amounts of humanity because people can't find jobs, right? Because we're replacing a lot of that. But at every single stage, if I just think about my own career, like software development as well, I was writing stuff in code 20 years ago that I wouldn't even think about now because there are libraries for it. People
Right.
creating libraries didn't displace me. It just made me more effective and more efficient.
Right. Right. Yeah, this is somebody asked me recently, like, you know, what's your advice to the kids like coming out of college? And I was like, I don't know, who cares? Like when I was a kid coming out of college and somebody asked a guy my age for advice, I asked a guy my age that for advice. They were like, I don't know what you're doing with these PCs. They're shitty computers. Like you should be working on a mainframe. Like, well, he kind of looked down his nose at me. I'm like, okay, that was, more for me, like, whatever,
Mhm.
like, I think the kids, like, I don't know, like, I'm having fun, I'm doing my best to, like, figure this stuff out, build cool stuff, and, like, understand it, because that's what I will always do, but I'm 59, like, I don't know what, like, the natives are gonna do totally different stuff. Then, they'll figure it out, and, like, my only real advice to kids coming out of college is, like, get your hands on it. Like, the one thing that I really don't love is, like, I was joking with somebody the other day, is like, I hate this Zoomer pessimism about the world is ending. We're just going to be passive and lay around. I'm like, man, I came of age when like Reagan was making fun of gay people for getting AIDS. Like,
Yeah.
the world is always kind of a shitty place if you look in the right way. Like, just go get up off your butt and do stuff. Like,
Oh yeah.
your hands on it. Like,
Well,
I didn't realize that's a grandpa statement for sure.
back in
But
my
it's
day,
true. Like, that's the what if mentality, right? Like, is like, you can't, it doesn't do you any good to be pessimistic and, say, why not? Like, go do stuff. Like, do whatever you can do. Isn't
yeah.
great.
If you think life is so bad right now, you should try maybe a couple of years in medieval Europe or something like that. I mean,
I
things
want
were
to do
a
that. Yeah,
lot worse
seriously.
back then. Um,
Yes. I mean, I realize like that's an old guy thing, but like, I do, I think you just have to get your hands on stuff and play with it and have that open mindedness. There's no, and it always does feel messy.
mhm.
Like, everybody always thinks like, "Oh, well, this time it's like, oh, you were so lucky, like, rightly, it was obvious, the internet was wide open," or
Oh
whatever,
yeah,
like,
of course.
that's true, it's like, it's always it's never the right time, it's never easy, it's never simple, it's never ready. Like, that is the time to engage with stuff is when it's
Hmm.
when it's early and uncomfortable. I always joked about, like, you can tell, like, something's a good idea as a technologist because you look at it, and you get the, like, sinking pit in your stomach of, like, "Wow, that's totally, yes, that's gonna happen, and man, is that gonna be a pain in the butt to do right now, it's
Hmm.
really gonna be hard."
Oh yeah.
And, like, that's how you know that sinking feeling of, like, "Oh, this is gonna suck," like,
Mhm.
"We gotta do it, but it's gonna suck."
Or if you're not feeling that, then
That's
you're
how
probably too late. Where I draw some optimism for what's going on is, actually at the core of this show is the idea that humanity is evolving. It's much more, the evolution of humanity is far more influenced at this point by societal evolution than it is by biological, right?
Mhm.
Like your genes define your journey from the beginning. But at this point, if you get sick, it's not necessarily your genes that are going to like help you. If you get cancer or something like that, they might actually be causing it. But treatment comes from the environment that you live in, the hospital systems, medicine, modern medicine, pharmaceuticals, the care that you get by your community. Basically, you as an individual surviving today and how your longevity as a human being is much more determined by the plumbing system and the quality of water that you drink and so many different factors that aren't really associated with you mutating your genes, right? And so like we as like I said, as humanity, we're evolving far faster. And what this really creates is another pressure system to evolve our society even faster. And so I'm optimistic to exactly what you said. Kids will figure it out. Like for us, it might be
Mhm.
a little bit scary because it's like shit, I've got to frame shift my thinking so quickly
Right.
that it's actually
Well, that's
changing
the
on a week to week basis, but
yeah,
kids are
that
gonna
is
grow
the
up
hard
with it.
part. Yeah, that is the hard part. I mean, we really are in this kind of exponential curve. Like, I feel it. It's hard. Like, there's a lot going on. It's like, I was joking with somebody of like, I try to kind of predict things. I'm usually about 6 months out. I can kind of see what's coming or whatever. I'm like, I don't even think I have a model for May at this point. Like, I'm just like, I don't even, it's going so fast. Like, I'm
Well,
just,
the funny thing is that if you're saying that, then shit, the rest of us don't have a chance because I tell people this the same thing. I'm like, back in the day, you say even 5 years ago, you could do stuff, you could write code or create a product and think, okay, at some point, somebody's going to create something that's going to change the game. That could happen in a
Mhm.
year, it could happen in 5 years. Now I have that feeling every single month. Like at some point, this is going
Yeah.
to change.
Oops. Oops. Yeah, I know. It's just
Yeah.
like all this stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the end state of that is. I think, it's funny. Like, I've been in these communities and there's like a couple of different competing agentic frameworks, and like your instinct is like fight over them, like, oh, adopt mine, adopt mine. I'm like, our thing, we call it gene transferring. We just like pointed at stuff. Like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'll just like take that, I'll just like grab that idea and like build it for myself. It's like trivial. What's like, I don't care. Like, your thing can win, my thing can win. I don't know. Like, I don't need there to be a big community for my thing to be successful. I'll just like take the ideas I want. It takes like 10 seconds and $1, and then I have that idea. It's like
Mhm.
whatever. Like, it's like I think there's some, that some of those rules are really kind of erasing and changing. I went to this talk years ago to your evolution idea of at Santa Fe Institute. They were talking about, I don't really quite remember it, but they were talking about like there's sort of eras in evolution, right? Where like you have the kind of pre-genetic era where you're just like banging around with chemicals and that's very slow. And then you have the replication, you start to get replication era, and it's like learning is happening inside the genes, but that's like generational. It's not very fast. And then you like get things that are smart enough to like convey information within a lifetime. So like you've got kind of simple culture where like the mama cat teaches the baby cat how to like hunt, and like that kind of propagates. But then you get the next level up from that is like writing, basically, where like you get longitudinal culture that can feed and go more than one. And like each one of those is like a order of magnitude factor 10 faster than the last one. And so like, we're kind of at the next one where, and there was actually speculation that the next one up was basically when you get past culture, you kind of get to self-modifying culture. You get to minds that can self-modify directly. And all of these are like, what's the time frame over which you can learn something and modify yourself.
yeah.
So like now you're at the point where like, we have AI models that can, in theory, like just change the way their brains work, right? So
Hmm.
we're going up a notch. So I think that's true. Like I think we are actually moving faster.
Well, you're at the bleeding edge of this stuff. So, are you still shocked or surprised by this stuff that you're seeing? And I'll tell you from my perspective, right? I'm nowhere near at the edge of where you are, but I still code and I still work with stuff. And I'm still baffled when I'm like in my coding environment, my IDE, and the software, the IDE just it suggests
Does
to me what my
yeah,
method should look like. And I'm like, how the F did you even know what it was supposed to do?
yeah, which is funny. Like so, yeah. Beyond only like even beyond like I find it quaint that you're reading code. Let me just put it that way. That's weird. That will sound quaint soon.
Uh-huh.
That will sound like punch cards soon. And so like, and actually like really what I think is going on right now is, you can imagine this sort of stack of abstraction in the computer industry, right? Like we started off with physical analog circuits and we decided like, oh, these could be actually like computers. So like, let's do binary and like literally like bits getting punched in punch cards and magnetic tape and all that stuff. And then we like went a layer up from, so there's like virtual circuits, but there's just,
Mhm.
then we go up a layer from that. We're like, well, let's like make this little like pseudo language called assembly language. And that like we can write, it's easier to build these than like toggling in zeros and ones. And then we are like, well, that's great, but let's like make something that's even more like language. It's like a low level programming language like C.
Mhm. And
That's cool. And like
compilers and
that
so on.
outputs like that. And then we go up to like higher level languages, like, interpreted languages, functional languages, whatever. And every time you go up that stack, the layer below you becomes what was the input, it becomes the output.
Yeah.
And it's not that you never look at it, but you almost never look at it. Like, you could go look at assembly. There are people who make money writing object code directly. It's very rare now. It's very specialized. You mostly don't. You mostly just trust your compiler to do its thing. We've moved a level up. And again, like if you think about what that stack is, it's always getting closer and closer to language and intention, right? And so now we're up at this layer where it is language, it is intention. Not perfect now. We don't like have a perfect, deterministic compiler the way we did before. So we're still working out best practices. There's still frameworks. There's still, sometimes it'll feel a little bit like magic incantations. But yeah, like I do, to answer your question, I do still get surprised. I wanted to build like I said, I wanted to build this terminal, terminal user interface for amplifier. And I got it started and it was like working. It was very basic. And I was like, okay, great, man. Like, tell me what all the features are. And it like told me like the features it wanted to do. And I was like, cool. Okay, here's what you're going to do. Like, you're going to act as an orchestrator so you don't get your context exhausted. You're going to like make sub agents. You're going to like keep a note file somewhere so you don't get lost. Just work on this. And if you get done before I come back in the morning, like just kind of keep going and make stuff up and like, add features that seem to make sense. It's like, do you remember the first Star Trek movie where they like sent Voyager out and it comes back and it's like this giant thing and it's like it's like this artificial on top. It felt like that. I woke up in the morning and like it's still running. Like it's been, and I go like fire a second session of amplifier up. There's this thing called session analyst. I point it back at the first one, which is still going. I'm like, what's going on over there? Like, is it okay? And it's like, it's okay, but it's really tired. Like every time it does something, it has to like flush its entire context. It's like constantly getting compacted. Yeah, but it's been running for like all this time. It's written like 90 different packages of features. They're all passing. The code's a little messy. It's been a little bit redundant a couple of times where it lost track of stuff, but basically it's fine. It worked out of the box. I'm just like, okay, great. Like I stopped the first session. I had the second one do some refactoring and add some tests. And it's working. It's up in my repo now. It's like I use it. It's great. Like, that's just like I don't know. I managed to say the magic spell, and like this thing just kind of popped out. Yeah, I had another one recently. I was working on some web stuff, and it was having a lot of trouble debugging the UI because I think it was like looking at it with like the multimodal stuff, and I was like, okay, this is silly. Let's not look at it. Let's go see if there's got to be some like packages out there like Python or whatever that do like object segmenting and image recognition, whatever. Go find those. So it goes and finds those, and it's like, okay, I found like 4 things. I'm going to build this pipeline. It'll look like this. I'm like, great, cool. I'm not even reading that. Okay, great. Now, like, here's the screenshot of the thing I want you to copy. Go copy it for me. And its tool set that it built for itself worked so well that not only did it copy the web, so it like copied the web page and turned it into YAML that it could then go turn into HTML. So like, it did this nice intermediate thing. Not only did that work, it worked so well that it picked up all of my browser tabs and all the icons in my task tray.
And transfer all your cookies.
It got everything. I know. It's just like, oh my God, like this thing. So get a little stuff like that all the time where it's just like, wow, this stuff is powerful.
That's amazing.
I was having this today where I've got like a bunch of these sessions open and like, I'm kind of tired because I haven't been able to keep it busy enough today. Like I keep giving it these big tasks to go do and it gets them done. And I have to like go back in and do work to like figure out what to do next. So like, they're constantly idle. Yeah, I'm like been making stuff up all day. Well, it's done now. Let me try this other thing.
So how do you see the work that you're doing, this agentic AI stuff? How do you see it transforming? If we go back to your employer, Microsoft, the productivity kind of business
Right.
that Microsoft's been in this whole time. I mean, the documents, do they go away? Does the essence of work change?
Well, it's so like I should be careful because this is like maybe a little bit more my opinion than what Satya would say. But if I look at Microsoft or any software company from a distance, like what's the point of all of this? Like, why do we do software to begin with? Well, because we want to get stuff done, right? So software is this mediation in between like what we intend and some action that happens, right? And like what kind of came of age in the era where like that was really hard to do. And so Microsoft had this idea of the software factory, right? Like we're going to figure out how to like make software like a factory where we're going to like figure out what intention is, like aggregate a bunch of intention into kind of similar packages, build that really well. And then like you get a bunch of like similar actions out the back end. And like, that's the software, but that bundling has been the software business. Well, guess what? Like AI is unbundling, right? So that model's going to start to wobble. That bundle doesn't matter as much because you can get more directly from your intention to your actions, but you still have all of the needs that you had along the way. Like the reason like Microsoft is so Microsoft is like, because they're enterprises. They're doing stuff in these compliance environments, these secure environments. Things have to be recorded, things have to be safe. Like there's all sorts of stuff that you have to do around that Microsoft does. So like, I think the core of it, what are you using to make the pixels be arranged into a document is not really that interesting. One of the things I wrote about maybe a year ago is pixels are free now. The way that the internet made communication free, like AI is kind of making pixels free. It's just getting cheaper and cheaper to put a pixel in front of somebody. It's like the assumption of friction is going away, but that's okay because there's other stuff that needs to happen around that platform. Microsoft started off by building, a literal platform and operating system for humans to build software. I think the next thing is to build one for agents to build software, and the agentic operating system looks very different. You can see pieces of it emerging. It's actually one of my jobs this morning that I was working on was having Amplifier go think about this with me. But like you watch, like I did this thing called Amplifier Stories where I just used HTML and Git to build PowerPoint like decks in a browser. They're very pretty. I told it to make, Apple Keynote minus the sort of marketing stuff. So they're kind of pragmatic Apple Keynote style. And they're like, they work really well. I'm like that, if I told you like, hey, I've got this great new presentation layer for you, it's a web browser and like this really complicated command line thing called Git, you would tell me to go pound sand because it's not actually very useful. But from the model's perspective, those are very clearly defined primitives that have clean orthogonal behaviors that are very predictable and easy to direct. And it's perfectly patient and happy to build on top of them. And so like that's an operating system now for a browser. And so I think like, the role for Microsoft is something like, let's go build operating systems for, people to build safe software agentically for
Mhm.
their enterprise need. Like that's still there's we don't have any less intention in the world. We probably have more of it, and we don't have any less need for the action. We just have a different mediation mechanism now. So I don't know. It's not that interesting to think about like how does a document get created? Because that's never like Microsoft doesn't charge per document for a reason, because that's not actually the valuable thing. Like, the valuable thing is helping you get your business intention done. It's like that's what that's what I think all software companies will do. And that's particularly what Microsoft will do in Microsoft way. That said, like all of that is kind of like me
Yeah.
more
Well,
personally than anything else.
Well, it definitely sounds like what you said before, like that shifting of low level assembly language working up the stack. And at every phase, you're abstracting the levels below it, right? So it sounds like from a productivity standpoint, we're starting to abstract away the concept of documents and now working at a higher level of intention, which in a way empowers us to do things at a higher level of thinking as well.
That's right. That's, I think, exactly the point. And this is, we talked about this before, but like I wrote this, I've been watching documents for 30, 40 years now, right? Like, and when I was in junior high, like a document was like high transactional costs. So it was like very formal. You had to like type the business letter and have,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And then they just like got less, formal over time. Right. And like, I got to the point where I thought it was like zero. Like in the crypto age, it was like if you texted diamond hand poop emoji, that was like,
Hmm.
a business document, right? Like how much less formal can it get than that? Like that had gotten to the zero. And then I wrote something where I said, like, I actually think we're at the negative interest rate era now of documents where like they're actually, and the reason I said that was like we had at one point somebody tried to write an engineering guide for one of the systems we were building. I was like, that's like instantly out of date. Like I don't want that. I want the system that has the context to write it for me so that I can interrogate it and get it updated and everything else. Like it just felt like the static artifact felt like litter almost. So like had negative value. So I think it's kind of interesting. Like I think like documents are now complicated. They're just mediations now. They're just a transfer of something that's transient. I don't think they matter as much as the intention and the action do.
And maybe this question is hard to answer right now, but if historically the document, sure, it was the intention, but it was also the interface. And
Sure.
and so now if we're doing away with the document as
And it's
the
record of truth.
yeah, it's a record of truth. And if we're doing away with that as the record or even the higher level intention, what becomes the interface?
So this is an interesting question, and I think you are correct that we don't really know the answer yet. So I think that like I feel like we're a little bit in the era, if you remember like the really early era of like word processor where everybody's
Yeah.
like making documents with all the different fonts, or like the really early era of the internet where like Amazon's webpage was like green for a
Mhm.
while and like, you had
Animated
like a
GIFs and stuff.
yeah, like like I think we're kind of in that era right now in terms of like AI interfaces, like agentically native AI interfaces. Like chat interfaces are great for a lot of stuff. You know, we're almost certainly going to get to something like a GUI experience where you talk to the experience and it changes itself. This is one of the things. Like the internet trained everybody that everything should be connected, right? Like if you get something that's a piece of software or tool or whatever that's not connected to the internet when it could be, it just feels broken and annoying to you. Like not everything, like your hammer doesn't need to be online, but like everything is kind of connected now. And like I think chatbots are teaching us that everything should be responsive and adaptive in the same way. Like if I can't just go ask my software to do what I want it to do, I'm going to be annoyed at it pretty soon. Like I'm already annoyed at my phone for not doing enough stuff, things
Mhm.
like that. So like, it's like I think that's like, but like if you take that to its logical extreme naively, everybody has a different interface. No one knows how anything works. Interchange is a nightmare. Okay, so that can't be the whole answer. We got to go figure out how that works. But I think we're definitely heading for this world where like you have your software. Like, you build what you want. You tell your system what you want. And then when it needs to interact with my system, they interact on our behalf. They do the translation for us. Figuring out how to do that in a safe, sane, efficient way is the hard part. But I think that's pretty clear.
Hmm.
Like that's where we're headed. Like highly personalized, self-aware. You tell something what you want, it does what you want. If you need it to be GUI for some reason, you have it build a GUI however you want it to be, et cetera, et cetera. I think that that's, something like that is emerging, but I think we don't really know yet. I think it's early. I think
Yeah.
we're still working this out.
With what you just brought up is obviously the future has a lot of agents doing things for us. One of the things that I was thinking about in this, I recently wrote a paper about this kind of like transference um, of authorship. But if I think about kind of project forward, we have agents now that if I have a question, the agent's going to go to the internet and do the research for me, and come back to me with an answer, right? Um, and then over time, eventually the agent's just going to write stuff for me as well, maybe create web
Sure.
pages and all that kind of stuff. But if we project
Sure.
forward at this, then what is the reason for me to go to the internet? Like, do we seek a place where there's a collapse of the open web? Because what's the point? Like, if I project 5, 10 years when an agent is doing all of that
So
for
it's
me,
yeah. So and it's a little bit worry, like, I hope not. I mean, I hope we still use the internet. I hope we still do interact with stuff directly. I think it's gonna be a mixture of things. I still spend plenty of time on the internet reading things and researching stuff. Um, the agent stuff, the other thing that's kind of funny about it, one of the techniques we use a lot is it's almost like psychological warfare with these things sometimes, it feels like. We're like, we'll have one of the amplifier sessions do something, and then I'll start another one up. I'm like, "Pfft, this guy over here is an idiot. Like, go check his work for me." And like, it'll come back with like, "Oh yeah, like that guy lied to you." He's like a bunch like, it's really funny. So like it's more complex than just being like completely dependent on one agent. Like there's definitely like, and then like, hopefully we continue to have a rich ecosystem of different models doing stuff. But I don't know what happens with that. I think like there's definitely always going to be new information created. Then the question is like how compressible is that? Like how novel is all the stuff that's coming out there? How much do they need to know that's new versus what they just know already? There's always current events, that kind of stuff that you go out to. I don't know. Like I think, it is probably the case that there's going to be an evolution in those business models as well. I think that's kind of unavoidable. Of what it is, I have no idea at this
yeah.
point. Like,
Well, it's
I
interesting to
really don't
think
think
about.
anyone knows right
When
now.
it's interesting to think of also what novelty really means, because I think one of the things I think about a lot is the surprise and the shock that I have at seeing something write code before I even know what I intend on doing with it makes
Right.
me think, is it because the technology is so advanced, or is it because we truly don't do a lot of unique and original thinking, right? Most of
It's
what
a
we
little
do,
both. It's a little both. I mean, you can definitely, we're really stressing these systems, and I definitely hit edges where like, I'm trying to do something and it just is not understanding what I'm trying to do, and like, there is a bit of like, oops, I was holding it wrong. Let me like think about it differently, coach it into something.
yeah.
Like the example of that I gave about the debugging the tabs and everything. It's a good example where like it was just banging its head against this problem, and then I was like, oh, I have to think about it better, and then it was fine.
There are some
So
constraints.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like we have written a lot of software as humanity. Like there's a lot of stuff out there, so I'm sure it's hard to get out of that shadow. I'm sure there's not much that can be written that hasn't been that's of value. But who knows? And like, it's like I don't know. It's a little bit like, and it's a little bit of a funny thing. It's just sort of like, man, I can't remember the last time I saw a word that didn't have one of the 26 letters in it. What the fuck is the matter with humanity? Like we're not making any new letters up. Like this is boring. Like we're
Uh-huh.
saying the same words over and over again. Like that's stupid. Like maybe you're not making this. I mean, I don't know. Like language is huge, right? Like you can
Yeah.
say a lot of stuff with 26 letters. So,
Hmm.
and however many words we have. So like, and it doesn't matter. You're like, oh, this model speaks English perfectly. Like we must not have anything to say. We must be stupid if it could learn English. I'm like, I don't think that's really quite how that works.
Well, Sam, this has been such a fascinating conversation. If I can ask you one last question, because interesting to see you've done so much already, from creating these massively successful and popular online documents all the way through now, which is really spearheading a lot of this work around agentic AI. And you're nowhere close to being done. You're a creator, as you said. You're a tinkerer. But if you could somehow project forward into a place in the future where you can reflect back on your body of work, both what you've done and maybe what you aspire to do over the next few
Right.
years, what would be a best case scenario where you feel like you would feel the biggest sense of accomplishment for what you've
I
been
mean,
able to produce?
yeah, I'm just a nerd. Like, I just like to do this stuff. So that's probably the biggest criticism of me is that I just like to play with it. But I really try hard to understand, like, what am I doing? Is it actually have value, positive value, net value for humanity or people? Right. I've never really worked on anything where I'm like, yeah, I know this is harming people. I'm
Mhm.
doing it anyways because the paycheck is great. Like, I've never done that. Not to say that, like, I mean, there's been bad stuff, I'm sure, in plenty of Google documents. Like, you can't build anything without people abusing it
Sure.
somehow. Um, but yeah, I do my best to build stuff that's valuable. And I think right now the legacy is mostly just I do think this is a dramatic transformation. I think it is virtually unprecedented. So I wouldn't miss it for the world. And I think you have to try to be your best self. I actually really think that the real answer to the anxiety that people feel about AI is, we keep getting these better and better and more powerful tools. And we learned, in the 20th century, when you get atomic bombs and mustard gas and bombers, you got to be your best selves. Humanity has to take it up a level and be better. And I think we do have to, I think we're going to do that again with AI. And that's kind of the thing, I just try to think of. I don't know if I'm contributing that much to, the larger cause, but I try to build good things. I try to try to be in the front of it, in the middle of it, try to understand it, try to call out risks to people who can make a difference, try to build useful things. That's enough. I think that's just, kind of all you can do, really. Just kind of try to build things with a sense of ethics, wonder, and amazement. And I also just kind of remind myself, we got here by tinkerers messing around and screwing up the stainless steel ingots and noticing and just making messes and finding virtue in them. That's how, life is 4 billion years of mistakes that somehow didn't die. That's what evolution is, right?
Mhm.
So that's the game that you do.
Well, definitely true to cause, and I identify with so much of what you said. But any case, Sam, it's an honor having you here. It's great to hear your perspective on the work that you're doing. Far too long since last time I saw you. I mean, I can't believe it's been like
Well, I mean, I can only be a new product every so often, man.
no, but this
It's
is this has been extraordinary. It's been great having you here. Thank you so much for being on Natural Selection, and I hope that we can catch up sometime soon.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Of
it.
course.
That was Sam Schillace, and now UnNatural Signals.
The following were key takeaway signals from my conversation with Sam. Number 1, survival favors self-disruption. The greatest threat to successful organizations is often their own past success. Companies survive major technological shifts when they're willing to cannibalize existing advantages before competitors do it for them. Number 2, platform shifts rewrite entire ecosystems. AI is not merely another feature layer. Like the internet, smartphones, or cloud computing, platform shifts reorganize industries, business models, labor structures, and competitive hierarchies simultaneously. Number 3, speed of learning beats size. In rapidly evolving environments, adaptability compounds faster than scale. Organizations that learn, iterate, and redeploy quickly often outperform slower incumbents with greater resources. And number 4, innovation is increasingly collaborative. Modern technological evolution is less about isolated genius and more about ecosystems, developers, APIs, cloud infrastructure, open source communities, and network intelligence evolving together. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to UnNatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.